Hi, and welcome to Decoding AQ, helping you to learn the tools, mindsets, and actions to thrive in an ever-changing world.
Welcome to the next episode of Decoding AQ. With me today, I have Paul Findlay. He's joining us from Brisbane in Australia, and he is the CEO of Reach Ecosystems, which is a leadership experience platform. And he's a true innovator in learning and leadership development, changing how these disciplines are perceived and, in fact, enacted globally. He's dedicated his career to dismantling the status quo, constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible in leadership training and development. So welcome to the show, Paul.
Thanks so much. I don't know where you got that from, but I'm feeling a little awkward. I got to step up my game here to live up to the hype.
Well, I'm going to hype it up even more for you, Paul. So a little bit of background. So before his current role at Reach Ecosystems, he was CEO of Professional Development Training, PDT, for over a decade. He led its expansion across Australia and internationally, focusing on delivering impactful on-site training and psychometric tools. He also served as project manager at the University of Queensland, where he implemented sophisticated travel management systems. And additionally, he's contributed as a board member of EO, Entrepreneurs Organisation, in enhancing learning experiences for members. And he's chaired the OrgDev Institute, promoting research and development in organizational growth. In fact, his mission is so bold, and it really resonates with us here at AQai, and it's to revolutionize the leader experience for over 1 million leaders, and by virtue then positively affect the lives of 10 million team members that they lead. So the goal reflects not only ambition, but this kind of deep commitment to enhancing organizational cultures and personal effectiveness across the globe. And just as we were warming up, Paul, we were talking about how complex things are and how complicated the world is. And sometimes we get a magic moment when we see it clearly and we can simplify something. So for you, Paul, what's something that you feel, God, that's complicated and it's starting to emerge just a little bit more simple for you, Paul?
It's a great question. Thank you. And I don't know, but I don't know if you asked AI to write something really eloquent to make someone sound good, but
of course I did, Paul. Of course I did.
The simple things. I had this realization, man, where you look at every role in just about every role in every industry, and you think about what's a key success factor for every role. And you go through and there's all these different competencies and things they have to do. But then you look at it and say, well, actually, if you took their software away, they would really struggle. And it's like, well, how is software built? And if you think of your accounting package or your CRM or your project management software, at the end of the day, people work through all of the key deliverables that a person has in their role, and they build software to make it easier and faster and give them data and insights. And it's like, right, so why hasn't that been done for leaders? Leadership is the last role in the world. Like, there's obviously that's a little bit of exaggeration, but in your general workforce, it's the last role that hasn't had someone stop and go, let me build a software system that reflects the main predictable steps of their job and give them tools to make them more effective and confident at each of those steps. It's like, wow, software for leadership, crazy. And that was one of those things. And it's fascinating, right? You look at leadership development, and clearly my companies have done leadership development for thousands of leaders across the world. And I liken it to teaching an engineer physics. Right, where you absolutely positively have to do it, right? They need to understand the frameworks and the principles and the approaches and all that stuff. But then the engineer goes to work and they've got all these specific tools, most of which are software, by the way, but all these specific tools that they have to learn to do their job. In leadership, you give them leadership development and they go back to work. It's like, you've got to give them the tools for their job. So we had that realization. And it sounded like an easy thing to fix, It's like, yeah, cool, just build some software for leadership. Why not? So, a million hours later, and we have something pretty amazing, but it's just that moment where you're like, why hasn't anybody else done that? And the thing that, sorry, the other thing that blows my mind with it, right? You look at things like the Gallup data, right, which everyone loves to get onto, which is fantastic, by the way. And it's like employee engagement is really low, right? 23% of people are engaged at work. It's like, all right, that's actually a consequence of leadership, right? And then they're like, oh, leaders are super fatigued. Like DDI research is like, leaders are really fatigued. And it's like, yeah, how would you be if you had no job, no tools for your job, right? How do you think you'd feel if you're the accountant and it's like, all right, when you do all the invoicing, all the reconciliations, all the everything, and there's no software, you'd be pretty tired, right? And it's like, and you wouldn't be that good at your job, right? And for some reason, man, the leadership is the last one to get it.
And so for people who don't have access to that, who don't see the light, they're cobbling together, I guess, other tools, right? Email, bit of Excel, bit of some Google Sheets, and we're using Docs for getting work done. So what's the difference for people who perhaps haven't seen inside, oh, what actually is leadership software? What's the difference between what they're getting fatigued by and making do with, and what you've built and what your realization is around there? Give us some difference points.
Yeah, so it's like enrolling in the school of hard knocks or getting the tools you need for your job, right? So if you look at the very first step of the employee life cycle as a place to start, you need to attract good talent, and then you need to select the right people, and then you need to bring them into the team in such a way that they get engaged and connected and build some trust with the other team members. So if you talk to a leader on their entrepreneurial journey or a leader in a small to medium business, and you say to them, what have you got to attract talent? Or how do you know you're selecting a person that's going to be suitable for your version of that role? Like, oh, work it out as I go. Basically, that's the answer. Right? There isn't actually, whereas if you said to, and then how do you bring them in to the team in such a way that they build rapport and trust? You've got collaboration. You're like, oh, we go to lunch on the first Friday when they join. It's like, cool, because they haven't actually been given a tool to do it. And that's just the simple reality of it. And this is the whole contrast. If you said to a person, if you said to them, the same person, that this, we'll say the person on their entrepreneurial journey, what did you do when you realized you needed to scale the business and do some marketing? Oh, I went and got this tool and that tool, right? I use Canva and HubSpot, whatever product, insert name here, and there's software for it, right? And they can do all the things. So if we started at those first three steps of the employee life cycle, you would have the ability to attract talent by giving them what they want and be able to prove that you were doing it. We'll end up getting detailed to get into that. But so one of the things, so I'll get into one. One of the things is that 30% of people are actively seeking opportunities for growth when they're looking for a new job. That's the number one driver for 30% of people. So a hiring manager can sit in front of the candidate and say, we're so committed to your personal and professional growth that we invest in your learning from day one with your own personally curated development pathway. And because it's software and AI and automation, the entire effort and cost the company needs to do is actually nothing. It's automated. So as long as they've used the tool for the next step, where we want to select the person that's going to lean into the role and enjoy the work, we use a thing called the interview companion, which helps the hiring manager do a strengths-based interview. So if we're using the strengths-based interview companion, the personal development pathway is already done, right? So they can literally sit there using this thing and go, oh, and we'll do this for you. The person starts work and logs into Teams or whatever the company uses, and there's their development dashboard waiting for them. So, right. So I just selected and secured talent. Now I've got to bring them into the team. So there's a presentation and a guide on how to use it that has helps everybody understand their communication and their collaboration and their strengths. Have a really fun collaboration activity. And by the end of a 45-minute session, we've got high psychological safety, collaboration, trust, and a mutual understanding and a common language. Right. So the employee life cycle continues right around to separation. And there's tools for every step right through to separation, but it gives you an idea. You either have to work it out or there's a tool, right? and it's automated. It's just there. So that's the I guess that's the contrast. Work it out or have it delivered through
Have it there for you.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think one of the challenges when things seem obvious, when they make sense, it almost creates this situation of, well, it can't be that simple. It's not that. I need to, and they dig in to the situation that they're in, even when it seems so obvious. Others, yeah, they get it. Brilliant. Right, let's run some pilots. Let's get it in. Let's start scaling it. And they work. And it reminds me a little bit, I don't know if you've seen it, but the BlackBerry film about the phone, from zero to hero to zero again. And looking at the stages of what was going on, where were the innovations in the early stages, where were they creating opportunity, and at various points where they hit barriers of growth that might be with their partners, Verizon, and how much traffic they could cope with on the towers, to the point at which the iPhone was launched and changed everything. And what do they dig it? No, we still have to have a keyboard. We have to have the click. We have to have the sound, from great engineers. And then the demise of these things. And I guess for many in their roles, when they haven't had something and they've been making do, how, tell me some of that journey of when you present to leaders, hey, look, do you realize you haven't had this? There's this other world over here. Look how nice the grass is. We can help you through the whole employee life cycle. Want to come and play with us? What happens at that stage? Do they say, great, thanks, Paul, finally, and they're in? Or is there pushback? What's kind of some of the challenges that people face when you give them this realization?
That's a very good question. So I'm going to answer it in two parts. The first part is, once you have their attention and you do that, to quote one from a room of CEOs the other day, they were going around the room giving feedback at the end of the session, and the quote was, "We all know that we all need what you have." Right? So they get it. They're like, "Oh my God, but here's the interesting thing from your question."
Yeah, they know it, but then what's next?
Well, getting the people there is the magic, right? It's because it's all about, for me, launching a new category of something in the world. There isn't a framework that people can get, right? The challenge is beating the human brain. All right. What I mean by that is our human brain, I'm sure you would know all of this stuff, but it actively seeks familiar, right? So we triage, is it dangerous or not? So firstly, do I know what it is, right? If I do, is it dangerous or isn't it? Right? This is all in a split second in your amygdala, right? And then it's like, okay, it's familiar. Got it. Is it, if it's familiar and I'm not seeking it, then I take the cognitive load away and I stop processing it. It's like we don't see most of the things around us, right? It's just how we're wired, because our brains are very hungry for energy. So we've got to, and we can only process so much in a day. So what you find yourself having to do is do communication that says to people, this is familiar, but you still don't know what it is. You don't know what it is, but it's easy to understand. Because if it's hard, if you don't know and it's complex, you're out, right? And keep their attention for long enough to go, hang on, I need to lean in because I understand it without knowing what it is, and it's relevant to me, and so I'm maintaining my interest and choosing to give it my attention. And that's the tricky thing. Once you get them there, they're like, oh my goodness, how come no one else has done this? But it's battling the way human brains process information. You can't put an ad, it's like putting an ad up for I don't know, wallets made of green grass, right? They may be the best thing in the world, but unless you know the benefits, you have no. It's just this. You know what wallets are and what green grass is, but it's not relevant. I didn't know there's a benefit, right? So it's this really fascinating thing to overcome the way human brains process information. That's the challenge.
And I've got a follow-on to dig into that a little bit more, because we started off and you in our warm-up and you were talking about, oh, isn't it amazing how co-pilots and AI co-pilots you've been working on can understand humans, and can interact with them. And so what role and what part can we help ourselves to get in the right rooms when perhaps we might fear going in there, we might not, be aware, or as you said, just not even see it or hear it if we're not hitting the right marks in terms of the comms or messaging to get in there. So I'm curious, have you found a way to get the right people in the room at scale? If so, what is it? And the second part, perhaps just follow on with the tease that you gave me at the beginning of, isn't it amazing how AI and AI co-pilots can understand humans? Because I want to dive into that too, on this tricky part of how do we understand how the brain works?
Sure. So point number one, how do you get attention at scale for something that people don't know that they don't know? I'll tell you next week. I haven't,
And next week, you'll tell me next week. Yeah, still figuring it out.
Not. Hopefully, I will have worked it out by then. Yeah. That proves to be a challenge that we have.
Work in progress, Paul. Work in progress. Yeah.
It's going fine, but it's fun. The slightly better quality answer attaches to answering the second question. Right. So a better quality answer is talking about the ubiquitous problems that leaders have and that we can solve with AI. So for example, if you talk about giving feedback, right, the stats on feedback are amazing. As I'm sure you know all this stuff, but 78% of people say that they work harder if they get positive feedback, and it improves their performance. 86% of people say that feedback that tells them what they could be doing better, redirecting feedback, helps them improve their performance. And 98% of people get resentful and actively disengaged if they don't get enough feedback. So just put these three things together. Negative feedback improves performance. Positive feedback improves performance. A lack of feedback results in resentment and active disengagement. So feedback on its own seems like a pretty simple thing to give if you're a leader, if you want better effectiveness. But 65% of people say they don't get enough feedback. So what's the deal? Well, the deal is that managers don't do it because it's scary. Right? Having a conversation that you think may upset someone is scary. And in fact, I think it's nearly 24% of people report losing sleep about having to give feedback the next day. Right? For a lot of people, it's really scary. Right? So the AI we're talking about, to join those dots back together again, and we'll close the loop for you. If we can say to a leader, would it be useful for you to be able to ask your AI how to give feedback to Ross that's likely to land well for him personally based on the way he processes information and communicates? So, well, actually, yeah, that'd be a useful thing to ask AI, right? Or if we're in a context where we have conflict, right, between Ross and Paul, and it's like, oh, hey, Copilot, based on how Ross and Paul both individually approach conflict, how can I resolve conflict between them that's likely and make it a positive experience for both of them? So instead of ignoring that thing that's bubbling away and turning into a cancer in the culture, we've got the confidence to address it, right? So when the AI does that for us, which ours does now, it's amazing, right? And so when we're talking broadly to, so I guess a better quality to your answer, what we're pretty sure from our test marketing is going to work for the mass communication is to ignore the fact that we have 13 modules and a couple of thousand products and features inside the software, and talk about one, like, are you worried about giving feedback, right? And double tap on that, and then, or, you know, do you have conflict you don't know how to resolve? And just the one thing, and basically ignore 99% of everything and talk about the one thing, is the fact that that problem happens to be solved by leadership software gets discovered later on.
It kind of makes me think of a few things, Paul. The, you know, Ken Blanchard, catch it in the moment, you know, of the 1 minute manager, right? So a lot of it comes down to timing. What is the one thing I need right now? What feedback? How, you know, the mix between personalization together with timing. And, it, you know, we have a plethora of all these answers. They're just mixed, forgotten in so many different corners and silos, right? So we can see stats, we can see stuff out there. I remember Adam Grant sharing a report, I think, that came out of Stanford about, oh, what are these magic 19 words that if you say before you give feedback, you'll get a, you know, big leap in productivity, for example. And it was something like, I'm going to give you these comments because I've got very high expectations and I know you can reach them. Something along those lines.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of that as you were talking, and I was at the same time thinking about a program I watched. I think it was on Netflix, and they had 100 people and they were doing various experiments to look at outcomes, performance, all sorts of things. They might say, for example, take half of them and show them photographs of people who committed crimes, explain what the crimes are, and allow them to think of the sentencing, and then change the faces up with the same crimes, and then see again, how would they sentence them between people who were perceived as good looking or bad looking, between, you know, racial biases. And another one where you mentioned about feedback, they had this example of doing a task. I think it was juggling, something like that, right? And they were juggling, how long could they juggle or spin a plate or something quite, you know, straightforward and simple. And for half of them, they gave feedback that was negative, right? So it was really difficult for some of the people that had to give that feedback to say, oh, Paul, well, you didn't do very well there when they did or didn't. Irrelevant of their performance, they had to either give negative feedback or positive feedback. And again, to your point, those who have, and then they had to come back and perform again. And they were looking at, yeah, it was plate spinning. It's coming back in my brain now, how long they spun the plate for. And
Right.
so the second time they looked at it, and it was really interesting, as you said, the impact of positive feedback versus negative feedback. And so we catch ourselves. We might know these things and we watch it and we see it, but the timing of in the moment, the situation that gets the better of us, or I've had poor sleep, or this person's really pissed me off, or whatever it might be, even when I know it, you know, we've known for years smoking's bad. People still do it. So we know the things, but what's the link between knowing and then doing? And I think that's often the hard piece. And is AI going to help us with that? And in terms of a technology that can help us in the moment do the right thing, even if we know it or didn't know it?
All right, so I believe yes, and the reason I believe that is something you articulated very well, and that's that we have these pieces of knowledge in the recesses of our brains and the recesses of our documents somewhere, and it's not until the thing with AI is that it can ingest everything and it has everything equally top of mind, you know, metaphorically, and it's so weird. I ask our AI, our leader co-pilot, questions, right? And it gives me these answers. I'm like, oh, I said that. That's right. Because we've done all this training content where you know, it's all like videos and stuff have been converted into text, so it can pass it easily. And I can't remember everything that's been done over the last 5 years, even though sometimes it was me right in the middle of it, or delivering it or reading it for whatever reason, but it knows, right? And so everything's always on hand, and it has the ability to curate and then provide the part that you need most,
So it's that relevancy of timing. It's the
Yeah.
all the knowledge exists in the library, but I had to go and put the cell in and look and scroll around to go and find where that is, and it took time. What we've now got the opportunity is it can recognize, it can predict, it can be in the moment of just in time of situational awareness and pop up the little piece that we need in order to get the outcome that we want. And I guess the evolution of our careers and the evolution of leadership, how will that impact leadership? Okay, we might perform better, we can find these things, but what's the next stage when we're all in that place where we do have access to all of these things? What do you see as being the next opportunities that come from, hopefully, a bit of space for thought, rather than constantly, I'm overwhelmed, I'm chasing my tail type of sense and feeling?
Right. So you covered three things there in my little brain, and I wanted to do the first one, but you've ended up somewhere even better, so I have to skip all the other bits. So I think maybe your middle name is like Alexa or something, and I could ask you anything, and you'll have the answer. So, what happens next is a very good question. So I believe that we have an opportunity to have a workforce where people enjoy their life at work, and people are between 20 and 30 or 40% more productive. We kind of accept a status quo where people aren't engaged, and leaders are fatigued and they're tired, right? Those things, when you look at the impact on organizations of the passive and active disengagement, or quiet quitting and loud quitting, where people are just going through the motions, or actively sabotaging their workplace and then leaving. If you look at the amount of productivity that is lost from the replacement through the recruitment, selection, the onboarding, during the onboarding, the time that takes of HR and leaders and of colleagues, the impact that it has on customers, and then the consequence, that's only the first 3 months. And then the really material impact of not getting the productivity until the person leaves, and you get on that hamster wheel of burning cash and productivity again. If we can change that paradigm to have, we select people based on strengths, so they will lean into they're more likely to lean into more of the work in the environment we're bringing them into. And then our leaders have the tools and the insight and the resources to keep them engaged and coached and developed and working to their strengths. We can have a profoundly more productive, happier workforce. And we spend so much time in our life at work. It's a travesty, honestly, of human life, that less than a quarter of us are engaged with what we do. That's not okay for the world to continue like that. So it's as you said, my first thing on the to-do list is 1 million leaders and 10 million team members, but there's another 1 billion or 8 after that. So it's a big job, but I believe there's a different paradigm at work. And so one of the, hey, have you done much of Marcus Buckingham's stuff?
Tell me more. No.
So I'm a big fan of Marcus Buckingham. So he helped write the Clifton Strengths Finder, and
okay. Yep.
He's all about strengths. So his definition of strengths is the things that when you do them, you feel energized and strong, right? And your weaknesses are the things that make you feel tired and depleted. So they may or may not correlate with ability. You can be really functionally good at something, and it just drains you. It's like, oh my goodness, I don't really like, right? Whereas your strengths are the things that you just lean into, and you're more likely to get in flow with, and you're engaged with, and you just love. And if you finish a day where you've worked to your strengths a lot, and you're like, oh, I feel amazing, right? I'm energized. So that's his lens on strengths. and when we're hiring people, we hire people usually because they were good at a job with the same job title at a different company. Now, the same job title, I'm sure you've written job descriptions in your time. You sat there and went, what do I need done? And you put a list of things, right? And then you went, what am I going to call it? And you gave it a title, right? And then your work environment is distinctly different from the work environment from the other hiring manager who did the same task, right? So we put so much weight on the fact they were good at this job title, but really what we want to know is this role going to play to their strengths? So will they come into an environment? So your channel partners, you may need them to be, I don't know, very detail oriented and probably adaptable. You've got that's a thing in your world. And so, if you're not, actually, let me give you a better example. Let me give you a better example. So the example and the analogy I use is actually about vet nurses, because it's pretty abstract, right? And my partner's a vet in an emergency hospital. So if your dog got hit by a car, you go in and she helps keep them alive, right? Puts them back together. So I hear about the vet nurses, and the vet nurses have lots of different jobs depending on or different functions in their role. So they can help out with triaging, they can do a lot of bedside manner, they can dress wounds, they can help in surgery, they can fill prescriptions, they look after animals in intensive care. There's all these different things they do, right? And there's this one vet nurse who's lovely. She's super, super lovely. She's very experienced. She's really good at her job. And her strengths are to be people-oriented, urgent, go, big picture person, right? She's on, lovely, and everyone loves her. And she's super caring and super warm, right? And in this particular version of vet nursing, she happens to fill a lot of prescriptions that the vets write. And it's often in treatment scenario for surgery and crisis things. So it's a bit high pressure. So because she's really big picture and people-oriented, and it's kind of high pressure, and she's very urgent, she often gets the decimal point wrong. So the animal gets 10 or 100 times too much or too little or something. It's very bad, very, very bad. And she feels horrible, right? The vets are beside themselves. The owners of the poor pet are beside themselves. The directors of the hospital are in a bad place with it all. But yet she's a really good vet nurse, really experienced and lovely. The thing is that version of the role doesn't play to her strengths. Her strengths are not in a detail orientation on these things. So the point is that people put too much weight on someone else, a job description from somewhere else. So in the future of work, sorry, long story to get to answer your question. But in the future of work, we have a culture and data that allows leaders to firstly select and then manage based on strengths. So people contribute to their full potential and they are energized by what they do, which naturally turns to better performance and better engagement. I think that's something that the world needs to do more of. Yeah.
It is fascinating, isn't it, how the predictability of job roles, the stability of that over time allowed us to define it with confidence and work to mastery. And so we would, optimize performance based on that set of tasks that were common from role to role. And yes, environment to environment, slightly tweaked and changed. But if you did that role in company X, company Y, it'd be reasonably similar with a few tweaks. And so we were able to transition within that realms of my role, my title. What do I do? Who am I? I'm an accountant. I'm an accountant for this company. I'm an accountant for that company. I'm a project manager for this company. I'm a project manager for that company. I might have principles and strengths, and I operate in that realm, and I solve tasks, solve problems and become productive. I think what you're talking about now is akin and aligned to a lot of Keith Ferrazzi's work of reimagining and pixelizing our work into all of those minutiae tasks and rebuilding the recipe that doesn't actually look like a predefined title. I want to make a cake, so I have all these ingredients. Those same ingredients, take a few out, and actually we create something of it. Don't know what it is. It's a sloppy mess, but actually it gets stuff done, right? It might nourish, it might do those things, but no, I wanted a cake. But I think the challenge for us is always the mess in the middle. And we're in panic mode. You know, we hear stories and have, for some of us, colleagues and people we know that are living in companies that are in crisis mode. You know, Samsung announced, oh, it's not 4-day work week for them, it's 6-day work week. 6-day work week, we're in crisis mode. Managers need to come back to deal with all of this transformation and change. And we have, you know, all these new potential tools, another piece of software, another thing to learn. I was reading this morning a case study of Moderna, the pharmaceutical company, that have built 750 unique GPTs. So rather than one ring to rule them all, we need Bart, we need Gemini, we need ChatGPT. No, we've niched it down to 750 unique ones trained for these unique pixelated tasks of requirement. I need one that does this for me in this way and has this collection of knowledge and is biased in that way, and another one. And it makes me come back to, that's how we dealt with people, right? We dealt with people that we wanted, somebody who could do all things, to then we niched it down. And we're thinking AI is, it can do all things. And then we niche it down in the same as a person can't, you know, do some of those, or it can, but do we believe it? You know, do we put same product with a new label on and sell it in 10 different industries? Because, yes, when that says toothpaste, I know it's for toothpaste, but it's the same recipe, same stuff that might clean the sink. But I wouldn't want it with a label that says sink cleaner to do my teeth, but it might be the same collection of stuff.
I have to come back to say there's cool things that we said the other day, context changes content. Let me come back to that in a second. I love that. But however, I just want to double click on something you're talking about there. You're talking about these job roles that we narrowed down to these specialties that were linear and defined. And then we talk about the world of AI and the pace of change. And the thing is, speaking to what you guys do, the thing that people need to be able to do is have their adaptability measured and focused on, because you can't be, this is the job role that we had in 1999. That wouldn't work out.
Or even January of 2024. Right.
Exactly.
You know, the reality of these things is we're in this flux of figuring out. And whilst there'll be principles of how we make decisions here, our culture, our piece, who do we serve and how we serve them, will evolve. And being able to come back to the BlackBerry story, you know, how do we solve along the way of what was communications to then private messages of the BBM messages. I remember, you know, having that with my BlackBerry at the time, to then the shift of, we're not selling minutes, we're shifting to data. And how do we ride each of these waves? At the moment, I'm watching the 6-parter about Spotify.
Oh, yeah.
You know, young Daniel, you know, 22 years old, and this combination between observing, you know, Pirate Bay of what was going on to kill the music industry, and the music industry is on its knees. They're sacking people because everyone's just grabbing it for free. But the experience, whilst they want it for free, the experience was compromised. Well, it would buffer, it would not be great quality, and I'd have to be exposed to porn ads or whatever to experience that. To now Spotify, where it's uniquely personal, it's personal to me, the timing to me, and how we monetize that in a different way. So to come back to people, that unique timing and unique personalization, we're seeing it in various industries. We're seeing it where technology allows us to deliver information at the right time to the right person to solve the challenge that we want. Sometimes it pisses us off, right? Oh, why have I just seen an advert for this? It's listening to me. I don't like that. You know, Karen and I, my wife, will have a conversation, and, you know, next time I log into Amazon or log into somewhere, lo and behold, there's some ads. We go, and we have a, you know, wave of the fist to the, you know, big brother. And on the other hand, I want it to be curated. I want it to be relevant when it suits me. And in our career path, these opportunities of work and how we navigate the crisis moment of 6-day work week in Samsung to the utopia of, 4 days or less, or everyone's enjoying it, I'm fulfilled, I'm contributing, is that we'll have moments of all of those things on a daily, weekly basis as we move. So I think for me, the fundamentals in where you talk about strengths, our ability to deal with certainty and uncertainty, to deal with familiar and unfamiliar, to deal with stress and no stress, to not just deal, actually thrive, to realize the environment has shifted from one that is more predictable, where we can use productivity and efficiency, to one where it is experimentation and imagination. And that is a fundamentally different set of strengths required for leaders, for leadership. Correct. To be okay with not knowing the answer, to become more scientists that are in the experimentation, and we have this hypothesis, and how quickly can we get feedback, that feedback loop of the accuracy to evolve and shift as we go. And that for many is disconcerting, that have worn the badge of expertise, have worn the badge of I've done this a long time, to that being less valuable. I remember my sleeve when I was at Scouts, and I had all the badges, and you wear that, and I transferred them from my sleeve onto my sleeping bag. You wear that as I've done fishing, I've done my knots, I've done all of these things of, when I need it, I'll be able to do it. But the reality is we often forget, and what we need is different in the moment. So as we come to the sort of witching hour of this session, we've got some great access to things like software now, right, through your organization and what you're doing. We're becoming familiar with how AI can help us curate to find the right answers, personalized to the right people, to improve our feedback and engagement. What are you really excited by in terms of what you're seeing that is helping thrive in this era of right now? Or what are some of the stories or some of the clients where they are doing things that is good?
The place that I see it most impactful, right, is where, because of software, we're able to reach down to the levels of the organization that we couldn't reach to previously. So we get to democratize access to development that changes lives and improves performance. So where once upon a time, learning about yourself, that self-discovery process, and learning about others, and having paradigm-changing learning experiences is only given to the people already identified as high potentials or already in senior leadership roles. And yet the day-to-day performance of the business is most impacted by your team leaders and the people delivering the work. And historically, they just get told how to do their job, right? That's it. And the other levels of the organization get that mind-expanding opportunity just to see things differently. And as software and AI permeate, we're able to give much like Spotify changes the economics of an industry, as software and AI change the economics in terms of access to insight and learning and the personal curation and all those things. We can bring all of that to every level of the organization, which is not only clearly good for the performance of the organization, because we're having the impact where the work happens, but it's also the right thing to do, because the fact that not everybody started with the same competitive advantage, and so they came into the workplace with certain bias around them, when we're able to give them the same opportunities for actual development, we see meaningful impact to human life, but also productivity of the organization.
And it's a leveling, right? As you just talked about, of what previously gave us access, whether that was genetics, the postcode, the district, the region, the university, the people you knew, that this can and is leveling the playing field to some extent, right, in terms of our ability to perform. It's democratizing access. And the next in the chain will be demonetize, right? And demonetizing what was, it's very expensive to go to this university or to be taught by this person, to now ultimately free to a level that is better than what was very expensive before. How the industry reimagines and reshapes around development, professional development, career development, post sets of education and the next phase of education, which is done on the job in work, portfolio careers of multiple things and longer generations. As we begin to figure out, and the decision to live to 120, to 150, to these points at some element in our future history, is what does work then look like? From retirement to make room for the next that are coming in, what do we then do? How do we contribute in different ways? These are great opportunities and great challenges, hence the paradox of the world that we're living in. And I remain endlessly curious to ask questions, to continually refine what are the right questions, not necessarily the right answers, because they'll be, as you mentioned, contextual to the time, to the environment, to what's going on. And one of the things I feel fundamentally engaged with is curiosity, right, as a component of our adaptability, to continually ask questions, to be why, what is that, what's going on here, what's new, what's different, and use those new things to unpick what I believed before rather than, I just need to find things that are familiar and back my story, back my evidence, so that I don't get a sense of, ooh, that was the wrong decision. No, it was the right decision then. I can make a new one now. I've got more information, got more data. So my last question to you that I ask every guest, Paul, is around curiosity. And it is, when was the last time you did something for the first time? And what was it?
I am pretty sure I do things for the first time every day. And in fact, I actually make a bit of a joke that my life's been one long assignment since grade 10, and I'm always doing version 1 of everything all the time. So yeah, I spend my life there, but sometimes I wish I got to do things for the second time more often. I feel like I never do, but can I'll make this brief, but I just want to say the curiosity thing. I spent a lot of time reflecting on AI and working with it and training it and things. And I think about my young son. I have an 11-year-old son, and I realized, and I talked to him about this in these words. I believe the most important attribute for a person to have a good quality life in his lifetime is curiosity. And because without curiosity, you don't get a broad understanding of things, because you end up being linear and focused on so narrow that you don't have context, because it's curiosity that gives you opportunity to get context. And I look at AI, and there's this whole thing called prompt engineering. What prompt engineering really is knowing what to ask, right? And you don't know what to ask unless you have had enough curiosity to have a broad perspective. And if you sit there and don't know what to ask, the AI can do nothing. The more depth and breadth you have to your questions, the more power the AI has to give you. And that it all comes from curiosity. So I'm delighted that you have that same lens. And frankly, for me, it's an obsession. So now I'm just trying to. So what I would love, if we get to talk again next week, I'll tell you how to communicate something new to the masses. And if you can tell me how to get my son more curious in everything, I will be forever grateful.
We'll be on a win. Well, let's do that. Let's get together, and we'll share some thoughts around increasing curiosity. Our first guest on the podcast was Dr. Hamilton, Diane Hamilton, and she wrote the Curiosity Code.
Yeah.
And has done a lot of work around curiosity. And for me, it's hand in hand with adaptability. So to be curious, we then also need our adaptability, and there's relationship between the two, because there's no application. And how does that evolve our thinking, our view? Are we curious within blinkers, or are we curious with an expanded horizon? When we are, does it change our mindset? Does it change our behavior? Links to unlearning, links to, as you mentioned, a few other parts, psychological safety, all of these things. Is it underpinned by curiosity, trust to understand self and to understand others that we go through? And I love your answer of every day it's a first. And I believe that too, right? Even if we're doing things many times, in that moment, it is still the first time, because things are different, right? We can't undo something. And Jeff Bezos says it well, every day is day one.
Yeah.
At Amazon, and to remain in that. And I feel that will be the sustainability and longevity of happy, prosperous, abundant lives and work, right? Is that we view it in that way. It's been an absolute pleasure to hang out again. I enjoyed our first contact. A shout out to David Zimmerman, who introduced us together. So thank you for that, David. And if people want to get in touch with you, Paul, what's the best way for them to get in touch if they go, yeah, right at the beginning, you had me at hello, software for leadership. Where do I go? How do they get to talk to you, Paul?
It's easiest to find me on LinkedIn and just Paul Findlay. I always have this black thing. I shower in my black shirt. You'll always find me with a black and blue and white thing around. It's easy to spot me, but Paul Findlay on LinkedIn, and I'll say hi. This has been an absolute, it's actually an honor. Honestly, I've looked at your guests. It's very humbling. I'm super grateful to be here, and it's been an absolute delight. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Paul. And I'll catch you next week. We'll have that conversation.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Ross.
Do you have the level of adaptability to survive and thrive the rapid changes ahead? Has your resilience got more comeback than a yo-yo? Do you have the ability to unlearn in order to reskill, upskill and break through? Find out today and uncover your adaptability profile and score, your AQ. Visit AQai.io to gain your personalized report across 15 scientifically validated dimensions of adaptability. For a limited time, enter code PODCAST65 for a complimentary AQME assessment. AQai, transforming the way people, teams, and organizations navigate change. Thank you for listening to this episode of Decoding AQ. Please make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast directory, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Please do leave a review, and be sure to tune in next time for more insights from our amazing guests.